That is not his face shape, right? That's not Hugh Jackman, that's Hugh Hackman. And for some reason, we've also upturned his eyebrow here a little bit so he looks sad. You know, we've got Hugh Sadman. What's up, guys? Welcome. Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable. Today, Professor Sam is going to be helping you guys with your portrait drawings. So I went into our Patreon Discord and asked our beautiful patrons to send me some of their art alongside a reference. The reference is very important here because without a reference, I wouldn't know what to fix. So let's not waste any more time here and get right into it. Our first entry comes from Zorom7. Now, at first glance, you might say, Sam, that doesn't actually need fixing. This looks pretty much perfect just the way it is. Well, to that I say screw you. And you'd be partially right because this render is already fantastic, but there's just a thing or two that we can do here that will make this look even better. Let me show you guys, okay? So one of the most important measurements that I want you guys to pay attention to is where the eye line sits on the face. Now look at my face, look into my eyes, look at my eye line, okay? I want you guys to pay attention to how long the top section is above my eye line versus how long the bottom section is below my eye line. This proportion is one of the most important measurements of the human face. If you don't use it when you're drawing your portraits, that's like driving with a blindfold on. Now, if we just take a look at the reference, okay, let's measure the top of where the scalp would be and draw a line to the bottom of the chin. And now the top is about 1/2 and the bottom is about 1/2. When I draw these lines on our drawing here, they should give me the same result, but unfortunately they do not. Look how much bigger this top half is. But this is a very easy fix. So I've pulled up the liquify tool here, and this basically allows me to just move things around without completely destroying them. Yeah, see, look at that. She's a chameleon. Ooh, yeah, look at that. Ooh. Anyways, but what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to use the liquify tool to bring the eyes up. So you can kind of see the difference here. Now this is the before, but if I toggle preview, this is the after. As soon as we bring the eye line up to the halfway point, you can see it's a very small change, but the portrait suddenly looks more open and a lot more comfortable. Now I also want to make sure that the spacing between the eyes is good. So the spacing between the eyes should be equal to about the length of one single eye. Let's make sure that's correct, and we can also change the shape of the iris just a little bit so that it looks like she's looking in the same direction. There's a little comparison of the before and the after, so the eyes have been moved a little bit closer together and they are a little bit more even in size. Something you might have noticed about the rendering is that her skin is very yellow. I get that you're trying to make her look Asian, but she doesn't quite look this sickly, especially when you compare it to the reference. So what we can do here is we can bring up the hue and saturation sliders, get the hue a little bit lower towards the reds, and then we're going to make the color a little bit less saturated, and you can see now it matches up very well with the reference. Now, of course, colors are subjective, so if you like making your characters look all yellow for stylistic purposes, that's on you. Now I'm going to just take some time here to remove her double eyelids and preserve her Asian features. And now for one final pass with liquify, I'm going to change the shape of her head to look more like an egg. I'm going to bring the ear up because it was way too low before, and then we'll shrink the side of the face in a little bit to match up with the reference. Now time for the moment of truth. Okay, here's a comparison of the before and the after. Now this is going to be a common theme throughout this video, which is the drawings that you've already given me were very solid basis, and the things that I've done to these drawings, they don't actually take that much time, nor do they take that much effort. So here's another great example of somebody who needs help. This is a drawing from Kiki Delivers. Now Kiki, I'm sure you deliver many things, but here unfortunately you did not deliver when it comes to proportions. And let's talk about why. So there's a few measurements that I love to use on the human face, and I've actually made a tutorial covering this on my Patreon, but one of the few very important measurements that you got to pay attention to is the distance from the hairline to the bottom of the chin, as well as how the space in between here is divided up. Now on the reference, you can see each third is occupied by a section of the face. First third is the forehead, the second third is the brow to the bottom of the nose, and the third is from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. You gotta pay attention to this, guys, okay? Because if you don't, look what happens. Here's the eyebrow, and here's the nose. What on earth is going on here, right? This distance between the brow and the bottom of the nose is way too vast. This is like the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. You've got enough fuel to get from the nose to the eyebrow, but not enough to get back. That's for vertical spacing. Now for horizontal spacing, you'll notice that the space between the eyes should be equal to the length of one eye. But here on our drawing, it is way too long. Kiki has actually specifically said, I need a crash course in how to use liquify. That skill does not compute. Don't worry, brother. picture, I got you. And we're gonna start big picture, okay? So we gotta bring this eye back. It's off on a field trip, it's taking a vacation, but we gotta bring that thing back, okay? So let's bring the inside of the eyebrow in along with that eye as well. And just for now, we're gonna bring in the inner corner of each of the eyes. We're gonna bring the nose and the mouth section up. One thing that you never want to do in Liquify is just take one thing and drag it too far, because then it becomes, you know, Picasso. Do small incremental changes, okay? Very small minor changes, very small brush strokes. So there's the before and after of that Liquify. We're paying attention to not only the vertical spacing, but also the horizontal spacing between the eyes. But if you'll excuse me, let me go on a bit of a rant. I'm not a big fan of this reference at all because it's so heavily edited. If you look at this, I mean, it's very monochromatic. Okay, this is all just shades of beige. There's not really much of a hue variation. So if you base a study off of this reference, chances are your drawing is going to come out looking very flat and monochromatic as well. I usually prefer to look for references that have a little bit more going on, a little bit more interesting lighting. Maybe there's some bounce light, some ambient light. Maybe there's a mixture of complementary colors instead of just one analogous color scheme. But anyways, before I get too sidetracked, there's the comparison between the before and the after, pre-proportional correction versus after proportional correction. And here's our third student submission for today by Aries. I will take all the advice and critique approximately month 3 of learning how to draw/paint. Now, right off the bat, Aries, despite the fact that I'm going to make a lot of changes to your drawing, I just want to say for your 3rd month of drawing and painting, this is fantastic, okay? You're definitely on the right track. So what exactly is going on here? Well, number 1, the shape of the face is just a little bit off. Now, I think this is Hugh Jackman, but if you look at the side of his face, you can see it's got a very chiseled shape, right? He's got the jawline. He's got these straight edges. Whereas on your version, you can see we've got a very soft and rounded outline for his face. That is not his face shape, right? That's not Hugh Jackman, that's Hugh Hackman. Something else to pay attention to, okay? Again, the spacing, right? The length of the eyes. The inside should be equal to about the length of one eye. And for some reason, we've also upturned his eyebrow here a little bit, so he looks sad. You know, we've got Hugh Sadman. The entire shape of his jaw has got to change. Let's give him a jaw. Change the shape of the hairline a little bit to match up the reference, and let's bring the eyebrows down, okay? Let's make the inside of the eyebrows lower so it looks like he has that serious expression instead of looking sad. Time for the eyes. So this eye is way too long. Way too long. So we're going to just bring this outer corner in, okay, and shrink the size of this eye. All right, still doesn't look like him, but this is the best we can do for now. At least he has a jawline. So the next thing that we have to pay attention to is the range of values. Usually, okay, if you're a newer artist, you tend to be a little bit scared to push contrast. But let me just show you guys, look at the value of the underside of his eyebrow. Look how dark that is, okay? And compare that to the value on his jacket. His jacket is lighter. Whereas on the drawing here, if we take this value on the underside of his eyebrow and we compare it to his jacket is much darker. Now, let's change that. I'm going to use a big round brush here and just add shadow to the entire side of the face that's supposed to be in shadow. Let's not be afraid. Look how much of a difference one single brush stroke can make, okay? But we're not going to stop there. Let's add even more. Let's add more depth. Let's make the eye socket even darker. Let's add some darker shadow just underneath the nose as well as onto the side of the mouth here. And we can add even more of that to the side of the face as well as just beneath the jawline. All right, look how dark that can get, okay? Let's not be afraid to add contrast here, guys. Now, something else I'm going to add is darker values inside of the eyes, okay? Underneath the eyelids, you're going to get a lot of ambient occlusion, so that means there's going to be a lack of light there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some basic rendering with a little bit of a sharper brush. This is going to be more of a detailed brush that kind of allows me to carve out the shapes of the wrinkles on his face. I don't know if I'm going to be able to capture his likeness exactly one for one here, but we're going to try our best. So there's before adding the shadows, there's after adding some shadows, okay? Do not be afraid to add contrast. Now, something else that you don't want to hesitate with is the silhouette of the hair. Watch this, okay? We're going to take a little sharp brush here. I'm going to add just some silhouette elements. I'm not adding any new values or any shading to his actual hair, but I'm just adding some silhouette here. Now, with this silhouette in place, look how much more that looks like hair. There's a comparison of the before and the after. We've changed the shape of his face. We've also added more contrast and darker values to the shadows on his face, so now you can see a very clear and distinct light source. And here's a great entry from Ultra Sketches 11. Now, this is already a beautiful portrait. I love the way you've rendered the face here. Very nice colors. To the average person, this might look like a perfectly fine portrait, but of course, we can always make it better. First thing I want you guys to do is take a look at the position of the mouth, okay? Look how much distance is between this corner and the side of the face. versus this corner and the side of the face. Now let's look at the drawing, okay? So there is the corner of the mouth and there's the side of the face. There's the corner of the mouth and there's the other side of the face. So there is a clear imbalance here if you're comparing the reference versus the drawing. Now, another really good way to keep track of where the mouth is supposed to be on the face is look at the center of the upper lip. Here on this reference, the dip here lines up with the center of the nose, whereas on the drawing, you can see this dip does not line up with the center of the nose. So for sure, the mouth is a little bit shifted towards the side, which means we're going to have to bring up the liquefy tool and we're going to have to move the mouth over just a little bit. I want to center it beneath the nose and I want to bring the outer corner of the lips in just a little bit so that it sits center on the face. So you guys can see there's before and there's after liquefy. Very small change, but it does make a big difference. Something else that I find a little bit jarring is the eyes and the way they're rendered. Now, usually just underneath the upper lid, you're going to see a little bit more shadow. So let's add some darkness and we can take this green color and kind of just cut back into the shape of the pupil there and just raise them up a little bit higher. That really softens the look of the eyes and it also makes it look like she's looking in a higher direction, and that's exactly what we want. If you take a look at some of the areas on this painting, maybe right here under the eyebrow, for example, or right here on the side of the face, we see a lot of repeated brush strokes with a hard round brush. And this look can be distracting in your final render. So what we can do is we can just gently blend out some of these rough edges. You never want to blend away all of your hard edges, but you do want to keep a solid balance between soft and hard. Especially here under the eyebrow, you can see having so many brush strokes doesn't actually do you any favors. In fact, it just makes that area look a little bit more distracting. So if we just soften that up, that gives you the exact same look, but now you have a balance of hard and soft edges. Now let's just add some hard edges here. Okay, let's add a hard brush stroke to the cheekbone, and then let's blend out the inside of that stroke, just like that. We can always add in some brush strokes with hard edges here just like that, but you want to be as economical as possible. If what you're trying to say can be said with one brush stroke, then don't use 3 brush strokes for it. Because oftentimes if you layer too many strokes, especially with a hard round brush, it becomes noise instead of information. Now I'm going to add in some details here just for the double eyelids above the eyes. And we want to make sure to blend some of these elements out and maintain the hard edges versus the soft edges. Now let's go around the mouth and just soften the edge of the lips a little bit, because when you have a really harsh and distinct edge between the lip and the rest of the skin, it makes your drawing look more like a drawing. You know what I mean? Because even if you look at your own lips right now, you know, it's never going to be a fully hard transition. There's always going to be some blending between the pink fleshy color on the lips and the rest of the skin. The hair is another area where we could do with a little bit more simplification, okay? So look at this, for example, the highlights here. It's a little bit scribbly, a little bit messy. We're going to use a slightly lighter grayish color for the highlights on the hair, and we're going to just paint that on. Now, this is going to look ridiculous when you first do it, but trust the process. Now we're going to take the original hair color, and using a technique of reduction, we're going to just cut back into the streak of highlight that we've placed on the hair. And look what happens. Look at the way this all just comes together. Okay, look how that reads as a highlight on the hair. Now, once you've done this, you can then start to go in with a little bit more of a sharper brush and add some details of stranding in the hair, but you don't want to scribble this from the get-go. You want to work big and then work your way down to small. And look at that. Let's add some silhouette to the hair, and that's a beautiful portrait. But again, these are very small changes. I haven't done anything that like completely changed the entire drawing. So that means you've already got a very solid base. But if we just pay a little bit more attention to some of these smaller details, you can turn your drawing from an 8 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. So there we go, guys. There's a little class critique session. Hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully you can take some of these tips and start applying them to your own art. Again, most of the time you guys are already 90% of the way there. But if you just add some of these tiny changes, boom! Suddenly, you're an art god. Subscribe to my channel if you guys want to see more art-related content. Check out my Patreon for monthly tutorials where I do stuff just like this. Actually, not just like this. Even better than this. That being said, thank you so much for watching this all the way through, and I'll see you guys on the next video. I love you guys.